Awesome. So we are having our first interview. Want to just open it up. This is our first Google Hangout interview for the Daily Impact, which brings you, well, we call it the digital porn for the social innovation space. But basically, more than anything else, just bringing it to you raw, just as it is. Those things that are truly impacting the earth, those people who are actually doing something to change it, and what their reasons are behind it. And today I am joined by Layne Hartsell, who has become a brother and a friend due to our Geese Gone Global travels. We actually saw Layne in Korea. I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, at our offices here at Hunter Farms, and Layne is in Korea. We are catching him at night. Layne, how you doing?
Hi, nice to be with you, and happy to be the first one on your new program.
So now, of course, we've done a lot of other interviews, but those have been those one straightforward interviews. But this is the first Google Hangout interview, which I think is awesome. So I'm going to shut up and do what we do best, and that is listen to the innovators making the impact. Layne, we're talking today about the work that you're doing regarding the incidents happening in Fukushima around their nuclear plant. And I'll let you introduce it, let you introduce what's going on, and from here on out, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm Layne Hartsell. I'm a research fellow at the P2P Foundation and also at the Asia Institute, and a research professor at Sukmyon University in Seoul. What you're speaking of is the triple meltdown that occurred after the tsunami or the earthquake and the tsunami in Fukushima Daiichi plant 3 years ago, and up until about probably last summer, it had kind of gone out of the media. They're getting ready to remove fuel rods, which was a very serious issue, and that was supposed to happen in the fall, and it began a little bit late, but they've been working on that. The Japanese government basically blotted out the media, so there's really not much information coming out of there since probably maybe 3 months ago, 2.5 months ago. So what we have is information that we've got up until that point. Our efforts have not been so much looking at the actual governmental processes, but the science behind it, like radiobiology, looking at fish, and what's in them and what's not in them, which is something that you were interested in. We've looked at possible ways to monitor radiation or any kind of uh, uh, process after some type of disaster occurs through using an app on the phone. So those are the areas that we've focused on, and mostly it's about open reasoning in the public and helping the public to understand what's going on and what's not going on. You've seen a lot of things on the internet from it's going to poison the whole Pacific, and a lot of these kind of scare tactics, and they're not really scare tactics necessarily, unless the people know what they're talking about. But people look at nuclear power as very, very scary, and it is. But it depends on how the science, how we look at the science and what we know is going on. And I think that's important to go with instead of just trying to make it up.
So tell me a little bit, people will hear nuclear science and what they'll wonder is kind of what's your angle, why is nuclear science significant to you, or why is it important to you? And then, well, I guess really boils down to it, just why do you give a hoot in hell in the first place?
Well, it's my job. It's the work that I do in philosophy of ethics and technology. So my training is in biomedicine. It's in life sciences, taking physics, but I'm not a nuclear physicist. They can handle questions like radioactive decay, nuclear chemistry, and all that kind of stuff, which I won't go into, which is quite complicated, and I would confuse it if I were to try to explain most of that. But what I've been looking at and why I'm interested is basically on how society deals with technology, not just Fukushima, but other issues, like especially nanotechnology, which is a publication that we have coming out this year. I think that that's really the focus is nanotechnology. It just so happens that Fukushima came up when we wrote a paper article a while back in Foreign Policy in Focus. That was September. And it got a lot of attention, so we thought, well, maybe we should try to explain more by getting together a group of scientists and managers and people who understood this kind of stuff and then write up a white paper. So again, it was really about the science and society and technology. The I think the second part of your question was uh, about the science itself. Did you want to, like, my reasons for doing it are related to the fellowship in science here and technology, but you wanted to know something about the science and the fish, or
Yeah, I guess one of the things that I think is significant is you're in Korea right now, right?
at the moment, yeah, I'm in Seoul.
So what's the relevance? I mean, from where you are right now, what are you seeing on the ground? What are you seeing that is impacting the lives of others where Fukushima makes a difference? I mean, why do you care from a very personal level on the ground? Why do Koreans care, about what's going on in Japan?
About a year ago, the government here was pretty much forced to ban a lot of fish coming out of Japan because the people here not quite understanding science and all that and how these things work, um, they were very afraid. So of anything coming from Japan, which really hurt the fishing industry there. The nuclear scientists here in Korea were trying to get out the information to the public, but it just didn't quite do it. So that was one case where it really hurt the economy of those provinces there in the north. And I think other areas from Japan, people were concerned about that. The case of the fish, which is the main focus, I think, because people are eating, uh, food and that kind of thing. I would be more concerned about the soils around the reactor, right at the reactor. In the case of the cesium and the strontium that are leaking into the water, as I understand it from nuclear physicists, so I just quote them, is that disperses very rapidly, just right in the kilometers around the reactor. But there was a question of like tuna because they swim all over the Pacific. There was a study just out of Oregon State University, I think it was. It was in USA Today today, the 20, or no, on the 24th actually, and they looked at albacore tuna who had higher levels of radiation. So that means there's a little bit of a risk. At 3-year-old fish didn't have any. 4-year-old fish had some higher levels, but it wasn't anywhere near. It was hundreds of levels down from what the U.S. Agriculture and FDA would put on that. And so there's even little. I thought the tuna would actually be quite a risk, like the bigger ones that they use in sushi. But there's no evidence that I can see yet that shows that. And in the case of those particular tuna, the albacore, they'll swim across the Pacific and so forth, but then they migrate down to the southern Pacific and live the rest of their life out there. So they're not going back and forth, across the Pacific. So they migrate in to the western coast of the United States and then go down.
What I really like to know about more, especially since you're on the ground, and especially given that you live with people every day in this space, is what does that really look like? I mean, outside of the science of it, understanding the science of it, understanding what that impact is, but what's the impact on the people in their everyday life, and how does this actually, change their lives for the negative or for the positive?
Okay, well, uh, looking at the fish, for example, from Japan, of course, that hurt the Japanese economy because of the overreaction in Korea. So, I was here in Korea when the the tragedy occurred, the earthquake, and of course the tsunami. And at that time, we had friends from Japan, or we had friends, Korean friends, who had friends from Japan come here to stay because in these cases, the plume of air, the smoke or whatever you want to call it, the radioisotopes go into the air and they move in a cloud. That's quite dangerous. So there is, when these things explode, there is a big risk. The other risk, of course, is it leaking into the ocean, which I mentioned a moment ago. So people at that time in 2011 were rightly concerned, and uh, that cloud actually moved out over the Pacific. I think they call it a plume. Moved out over the Pacific and then landed somewhere over in North America there. By the time I got there, I don't think that their measurements were very high. Radioactive iodine is the major one. That lasts for about 7 days. That affects the thyroid, which is pretty serious. So on the ground, of course, that was a problem in Japan. What the Japanese people were telling us here is basically this information I'm giving you. And then, of course, I've looked at the scientific information and the physicians that have treated some of the children there and so forth. So right now and over the past 3 years, it kind of goes in and out of the media, but kind of disappeared about a year ago. And so then we wrote an article about it and about open science in this case. And that's what ended up being the white paper and so on that you were talking about. Uh, right now, well, South Korea has just had a really serious and sad tragedy related to the Sewol. It's a ferry that just sank off the coast, the southern coast, on its way to Jeju-do, and maybe more than 250 of their high school students perished. It was very serious, just 2 weeks ago. So there's not really anything in the news other than this particular case, and for good reason. The issue from Fukushima really isn't any big deal right now here.
So I know that the current tragedy can always divert our attention from other things, but that being said, what I'm also trying to cover is, I remember when we were in Korea, there was a joke at one of the tables when we sat down and ate together about the size of the fish and how we were eating the smaller fish, so it was okay. We hadn't to worry about the Fukushima stuff with the big
Yeah.
fish. It seems like there's a certain level, of course, current circumstances being considered. At some point, there seemed like there was a certain level of kind of false hysteria around buying Japanese agriculture products like fish and so forth and so on. And what I'd like to know, really, we have about another 2 minutes max, and I'd like to know the solution that you guys came up with to reduce that hysteria. And then, of course, we know that by reducing hysteria, it means that more products are being purchased. People have more confidence in the Japanese products, and therefore they're helping that farmer, that fisher, that regular Joe to actually live a better lifestyle because he's able to feed his family more with those earnings. So what was the solution that you guys came up with to try to calm some of that hysteria and also to keep people from the harmful things that were happening in Fukushima?
Yeah, well, let me just make one comment about when you were here. That was certainly the hysteria that you're talking about. That you saw it, the concern over where is this fish coming from that we're eating. Those particular fish come from Korea. It's a famous type of fish here, if I recall. So right before that, about 6 months is when that was in the news and that hysteria came up. But there's always tends to be some kind of hysteria around things like this, and there's always overreactions. But we do have good measurements, and we can see what's in food these days. Um, the solution, I mean, no one really has a solution to triple meltdown, but what we were looking at is creating dialogue about science and technology in society. So what I call this open reasoning, and I borrow the concept from Amartya Sen, the great economist at Cambridge, who developed the term public reasoning. I just call it open reasoning because it's related to P2P. The idea is that people get together and they talk as peers, and you have experts that can come and share knowledge, and then the people take that knowledge and then they can use that to write letters and pressure government, city, whatever they're going to do. And I think that knowledge will populace is what you want to have. That would be one solution as far as new technologies coming about, nanotechnology, robotics, AI, uh, biotechnology, which is going into what we call the golden age. So all of those are really important, including nuclear. Coal has just got to go. Those kind of dirty industries. Everybody knows that.
So very specifically, I think there was an app that came out of this to take. I think there was a late. You tell me about the organizing of some of the people in Japan to actually test
Hmm.
their test the radioactivity of their different spaces, and then feed that back to an app to provide proper data. Because you're speaking about having data and people being informed. I'm thinking that this app was actually for that.
This is a solution that can be used anywhere. The particular app is now out on Google Play in Korean form. So this to solve the actual particular any hysteria, what people can do is they buy that small Geiger counter. Get a good one, maybe $250 or more, and you can test your food with that. And then on the app, you can write in what your numbers are. So these are measured in becquerels. Becquerel was a scientist in 1903 with Marie Curie wrote the Nobel Prize for radiation. And early on, it was curies that they measure radiation in, and then it went to becquerels afterwards. So they measure it in becquerels today. And then this app brings information together from different areas of the country. And the way, because of the peer process, you can weed out outliers if someone happens to be, playing around and putting in high values or too low values or whatever. Those can be weeded out. So you get a fairly accurate view. And I think that, of course, what we would find is exactly what I was saying, that there's no risk, or the risk is very small.
Well, Layne, I appreciate it, man. I know it's late inside Korea, so I thank you for taking the time out. I think this is a very interesting topic that very few people are aware of. We're all aware of what happened in Japan to some extent,
Hmm.
but the ongoing problems and the ripple effect of that is something I think most people are not aware of at all. So I know it's something that you do every day, and you're involved in that work, and thank you for taking the time out to share it with us.
Glad to be with you.
All right, man. Take care.
Mhm.